Hi, today's topic is how to add custom data markers to your sitemap based on the hole type. So I'm going to use the gINT standard US lab files that ship with the program for this demonstration. So the first thing we want to do, the idea here is when you're in the sitemap tab, you may have different types of holes on your sitemap, and you want to display that with a unique marker instead of all of them just being a circle or a solid filled circle or something like that. So let's go ahead and go into the borehole tab and take a look at what we have. In this case, I have uniquely identified the boreholes based on the borehole ID, and not everybody is going to be consistent enough to do that. In other words, they're not going to say that MW, if they always start with MW, it's going to be a monitoring well, and if they always start with TP, it's going to be a test pit, and if they always start with CPT, etc. So one way to do this is to add a field called hole type, and that way it doesn't matter how you enter your IDs. They don't have to be in a certain format. It's whatever numbering system you use. So in order to do that, I'm going to first create a lookup list with different hole types. So I'm going to go into data design. I'm going to go into library tables, and I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to call it hole type. Just going to put name. And that's really all we need for this example. Go ahead and hit OK. So now I'm going to go into the library data tab of hole type, and I'm going to add some different values. So I'm going to put in soil boring. I'll put in test well. I'll put in monitoring well. I'll put in CPT. And what else do we want? That's probably good for this demonstration. Oh, maybe test pit. Let's go back and add test pit. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a field called hole type to my database. I'm going to reference that lookup list that I just created. So I'm just going to go up to tables. I'm going to say add field. I'm going to create a field called hole type. I'm going to make it a lookup list, which is a library table lookup lists. And I'm going to reference the one that I created called hole type. I'm going to force people to use the lookup. And since this is something we want to have everybody fill out, I'm going to go ahead and make it a required field. Say OK. I'm going to drag it over here next to this. And so, again, if you don't have the borehole ID, you know, Bs are always soil boring and so forth. But for this purpose, I'm going to show you the borehole IDs that are already unique. So that's a soil boring, that's a CPT, it's a monitoring well, it's a test pit, and that's a test well. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a unique marker based on these hole types. And I'm going to use basically an expression. And I've already got it written, and I'll kind of explain it. I'm not going to write the entire expression here in this example, but we'll go ahead and take a look at it. So if I go ahead and go into sitemap, and I go into the sitemap area, I'm going point ID display, and there's a sitemap point ID marker expression that can be written here. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull one in that I've already written. And I'll just do that real quick. Then I'll just kind of explain what we're doing here. So in the point ID expression that we've written, I'm basically looking, I'm using this switch function. It's kind of a multiple if, and I'm saying like the point hole type field, CPT, then I'm going to use this particular data marker. I'm going to use this data marker, this data marker, this data marker, so forth for the different items that we have. Now you can create your own custom data markers. You can use the existing ones that are already there. They're typically going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They have a description like solid filled circle and so forth. These happen to be custom ones that I created. So we're going to go ahead and hit OK there. And as you can see, it changed these markers based on that. So the CPT has a little bit different marker. Test pit has a different one, and so forth. You can get as creative as you want. Soil boring looks a little different. It's not quite a solid filled circle. And you can, again, come up with whatever data markers you want. That's under symbol design, data markers, and you can have a wide variety. These are just custom ones that I created, but they could just be the standard ones: a solid filled circle, a square, and you always give the name in your expression. So I could, just for example, I could go back into here, and if I wanted to change this again, I go to the point ID display, I go to the point ID marker expression, and I could just use, let's say I want to use marker 5 or something. I could just do that as well. Okay, and change that one to that one, as you can see there. So that's the idea. You're basically able to do that. And then what that does is, let's say your numbers, your point ID numbers aren't quite as clear. Let's just say this is 1, and this is 2, and this is 3, and this is 4, and this is 5, whatever they're going to be. You can see where it might be a little bit nicer to know what you're looking at based on the marker if the number itself doesn't tell you what you want. So again, that's in the sitemap entity. Another place that this can be used. So since I wrote this as an expression, I'm going to copy that to a user system data item. And a user system data item is something that can be used over and over again. So I probably want to use this on my sitemap report as well, instead of just the sitemap entity. So I'm going to highlight everything. I'm going to right click. I'm going to say write user system data. And I'm going to call it sitemap DM override, something like that. I'm going to hit OK. And then you see it changed that here. And what it also did was it created a user system data under data design, user system data. I now have a sitemap data marker override expression, which is that same expression, and now I can use that again. So let's say I want to use that on my sitemap report. So I go to report design, I go to sitemaps, go into the properties of the sitemap, I go into the data representation tab, and here's a data marker expression. So that's what we want to pull in. I'm going to pull in a user system data item, which is the one that we just created. I'm going to pull on the one called whole type. I'm sorry, what did I call that? Data marker, sitemap data marker. Sitemap DM override. I'm going to paste that in. Kind of hit OK. I'm going to change all the data markers to a little bit higher, a little bit bigger. This is 0.1. Let's make it 0.15. And so now if I go to output and I use that same expression on my sitemap, you'll see now that that is basically the same thing. Kind of a good little trick. Makes sitemaps a little bit more presentation friendly to have a different marker. If you have any questions, you can always look up data marker override expressions. You can override data markers in maps. You can override data markers in graphs. A wide variety of uses for that. This is just one way to do it. You could certainly key it off the borehole ID. If, for example, your borehole IDs, the boreholes always start with B and the CPTs always start with CPT, you could rewrite your expression to look at the borehole ID and see if it begins with S or something and make it a soil boring, or if it begins with CPT, make it a CPT. So you don't have to use this field, but this gives you the ability to not worry about exactly how everybody's entering in the borehole IDs and make, if they're not consistent with the numbering or the prefix, that's going to identify what type of hole it is. Okay, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.